modern suspense or high-stakes thrillers, and especially dystopian fiction, let's say over the last decade or so. The whole idea of the villain has totally changed.
Completely. We are, I think, officially done with the singular bad guy.
Right. The scar-faced criminal mastermind in his volcano lair, or the, mustache-twirling landlord.
Yeah.
That guy who you can just confront and beat up.
That archetype is obsolete. It has to be. Because the threat today is, well, it's far more diffuse. The antagonist has morphed into the system.
The system, yeah.
It's omnipresent, it's algorithmic, and it feels omnipotent. You're talking about AI surveillance, cultural hive minds that demand total conformity.
Or even just a digital bureaucracy that's so massive you can't even find a person to complain to.
Exactly. And that creates a huge structural problem for any story. If your enemy is a cloud server or a kind of cultural mood,
how does the hero win?
Right. How does the classic chosen one or the action hero with all the guns, how do they win? You can't punch a system. You can't shoot an algorithm.
Your traditional hero is suddenly ineffective.
The system anticipates them. If you're playing by its rules, digital or social, the system is designed to win.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Storytellers obviously needed a solution here, a way to inject some chaos into that perfect closed system. And they found it. They found it in this really potent plot device that we're calling the Manousos Variable.
The analog resistor.
Exactly. This is the person who survives not through magic or destiny, but through this stubborn, difficult, and profoundly antiquated discipline.
The Manousos Variable is really, it's the introduction of a chaotic blind spot. A known unknown dropped right into the antagonist's perfectly ordered world.
So our mission for this deep dive is for you to understand how this character, this obsolete outsider, grounds these huge stories in real human agency, and why their refusal to be counted makes them the ultimate weapon.
To start, we really have to define the core mechanism of this variable. The Manousos figure is a character who exists entirely outside the feed.
Outside the feed? What do you mean by that?
Well, if the villain controls, say, 99.9% of all information flow through digital surveillance, social credit, whatever it is.
Okay.
This figure is the one person who has deliberately and with great effort severed that connection.
And it's not just that they don't like technology. It's a complete refusal to participate in the whole consensus, which must take this almost inhuman rigor.
Precisely. And they're usually built on three essential pillars. The first, and the most obvious one, is analog reliance.
Okay.
They use methods that are just totally invisible to digital monitoring. So think paper records, maybe old encrypted landlines, a P.O. box instead of a home address.
This is the character in the movie who's always paying for things with crumpled bills, right?
Yeah.
Refuses to carry a phone, keeps all their documents in these heavy ledgers locked in a safe.
Yes. They've made themselves digitally homeless. That's their first line of defense. They are a ghost to the AI.
A ghost to the AI. I like that.
If the villain system is tracking people through phone pings or credit card swipes, the Manousos figure is simply not there.
And their power isn't passive.
Which I think leads to the second pillar, which is so crucial. Hyper-discipline.
Yes. Their immunity is not a gift. It's not an innate talent. It is maintained through a rigorous, often exhausting routine of avoidance and self-control.
This is a full-time job for them.
It's a 2047 commitment.
Yeah.
They have to constantly work to stay off the grid, to stay uncounted.
Yeah.
The story always emphasizes that their strength comes from, well, sustained, boring, painful effort.
They're paranoid, but not as a character flaw. It's a professional necessity.
Exactly. So if the first pillar is the method, the second is the moral will to keep it up, and the third trait just flows from that. It's social isolation.
Because they have to be.
They have to be. Because they refuse to participate in the convenience and the conformity of the system, everyone else sees them as paranoid or eccentric or just obsolete. They are outcasts.
Their isolation is the whole point.
Right. They're lonely because they have chosen not to be infected by the social dependencies that let the system work. So if we go back to our math analogy, the antagonist's plan is an equation.
An equation based on predictable human behavior. We choose convenience, we choose fear, we choose to conform. The Manousos figure is the erratic value, like an irrational number, like pi, that just enters the equation and breaks the whole algorithm.
It's like running a super high-res weather simulation for the whole planet, and one person decides to drop a single tiny bag of ice cubes into the Pacific. It's a tiny analog chaos that this multi-million-dollar model just cannot predict.
It can't. It's too focused on the big currents.
Their refusal to just get with the program makes them an error in the code. Which brings us to the big question. How does this character actually fix the hero's narrative problem? And this is where it gets really interesting, I think, thematically. It's all about agency.
Right.
The main power of the Manousos variable is its complete rejection of the classic chosen one trope.
In a traditional story, mythology or fantasy, the hero is special because of their birth or prophecy. Harry Potter is saved by destiny. Neo is the one because of his code.
The resistance is built in. It's not really a choice.
Exactly. It's a biological or metaphysical imperative, not a difficult, conscious moral choice. And I think that lacks a certain intellectual punch for a modern audience.
But the Manousos variable is all about the triumph of agency. They're rarely special by birth or talent. They are defined entirely by the discipline of their choices.
Yeah, think about the quiet librarian who just refuses to log her reading habits, or the disillusioned tech guy who won't use the company's smartphone.
They're resisting through these small, tedious, daily acts of discipline. Not magic, not destiny.
They are the ultimate self-made resistor. And this is why the archetype is so resonant for you, the modern reader, who might feel trapped by your own systems of convenience.
Right. When you read a chosen one story, it's escapism. External forces save the day.
But when you encounter a Manousos figure, the story gives you this difficult, uncomfortable roadmap. The argument is clear. Resistance is a skill. It's forged through effort, not a gift you were born with.
The narrative is essentially telling you, you could do this too.
But it would be very, very hard.
And you would be very, very lonely. It elevates the whole genre from just escapism to a kind of moral instruction.
It tells us that personal integrity is a practice. It's not just a state of being.
So if resistance is a skill, that ties directly into their tactical strength. This character solves what writers sometimes call the Superman problem in modern suspense.
The problem being, in a hyper-connected world, how do you even have suspense?
Exactly. Technology can solve most mysteries instantly. And if the villain controls the entire digital infrastructure, the hero has nowhere to hide. The plot just dies.
The villain just checks the digital paper trail, phone records, traffic cams, purchase history, game over.
But the Manousos variable weaponizes the primitive to get around all that. In a world obsessed with high-speed digital surveillance.
The slowest, most secure method of communication actually becomes the most valuable.
And it creates this wonderful irony that writers just love. The villain, who's always arrogant and obsessed with the future, simply cannot conceive that someone would use a method from 50 years ago.
No, they're looking for a massive data breach, a high-tech mole. They are not looking for a dead drop under a park bench.
Or encrypted notes passed through a chain of anonymous hands.
Think about the classic scenario. The bad guy tracks everyone through facial recognition and credit card use. The hero's on the run. If the hero tries to hack the system, they're playing the villain's game.
A game they're built to lose.
Right. But if they find the Manousos figure, this hermit who lives off-grid, pays in cash, communicates via ciphers and newspapers, the whole dynamic shifts.
The tension is no longer, can the hero outcode the computer? It becomes, can they survive without the digital tools they rely on?
And can the villain adapt to a fundamentally analog chase? It forces them to use less efficient methods. Human manpower, physical surveillance, boots on the ground.
Which introduces human error. It slows everything down.
The Manousos variable validates the old ways as genuinely superior tactics in an age of total surveillance.
It's the ultimate David versus Goliath story, where the stone is something so mundane, so forgotten, that Goliath didn't even see it as a weapon. So we've established that the analog tactics work, but what's the emotional cost of that? Now we get to argument 3, the cost of truth. Unlike that classic, benevolent tea-drinking sage who mentors the hero, the Manousos figure is rarely a comforting person to be around.
And that's vital for the character's integrity. Living outside a corrupt system is profoundly traumatizing. It requires constant, grinding paranoia.
And it demands cutting ties.
It absolutely does. Cutting ties with loved ones who are infected by the convenience of the status quo. The Manousos figure can't risk their kid revealing their location through a social media post.
So they're often presented as abrasive or cynical or just deeply, deeply lonely.
They've been broken by their resistance. And that emotional damage serves a critical narrative purpose. It establishes the stakes.
If the leader of the resistance is all smiles and well-adjusted, you don't really believe the system is that scary.
Exactly. The Manousos figure isn't just giving the hero a secret weapon, they're giving them a warning. Their very existence asks a protagonist, and you, the listener, a brutal question. Are you willing to end up like me?
Exactly. The protagonist learns that if they want the truth, the absolute truth, they have to accept the isolation and the emotional cost that comes with it.
It strips away all the glamour of rebellion.
Right. It suggests that maintaining integrity in a world like that results in a kind of voluntary martyrdom. Not death, necessarily, but an existential loneliness, which, ironically, makes the hero's final decision to fight so much more heroic, because now they know the full ugly price.
They know what they're signing up for.
But isn't there a risk there? I mean, you're describing someone who's perpetually angry, mistrustful, rejects everything modern. Why would a reader want to follow someone so abrasive?
Well, that's where the craft of writing comes in. It all depends on how the writer handles them. If they're just a grumpy obstacle, yeah, the character fails. But if their paranoia is constantly validated, if every single time they're cautious, the plot proves them right, then the character shifts. They're not unlikable anymore. They're a necessary, if difficult, oracle of truth. Their social problems are just a side effect of their intellectual clarity. But despite the necessity of this figure, we do have to acknowledge the critics. There are some structural weaknesses. Let's call it counterpoint A, the Luddite fallacy.
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
The argument that this character is just an author's soapbox. A lazy way to glorify some fictional golden age and just demonize technology.
It's the risk of the story basically turning into a complaint that kids these days should just use a pen and paper.
Which makes it feel less like a thriller and more like a preachy treatise against modernity.
Right, but what's fascinating here is the rebuttal. The effective use of the variable is not anti-technology. That criticism misunderstands the character entirely.
So they're not just technophobes.
Not at all. The Manousos figure is successful because they understand the limits of technology. They understand its dependencies better than anyone.
They're often former insiders, right? Coders, analysts.
Exactly. People who knew the system inside and out. They understood the single point of failure was always the human reliance on the network. They knew why they had to get away from it. They're not rejecting the tool, they're rejecting the slavery to the tool.
That's a key distinction.
This device, when it's used well, isn't anti-progress. It's fiercely pro-autonomy, pro-critical thinking.
Okay, that makes sense. Let's move to another concern then. Counterpoint B. The risk of this figure being a simple deus ex machina.
Ah, yes. The magical hermit.
The hero is cornered, the villain has won, and boom. A mysterious stranger appears out of nowhere with the exact immunity needed to save the day. It can feel really cheap, unearned.
That is a very valid risk, and it happens when the writer doesn't flesh out the character properly, but it's usually mitigated by what we call the transactional nature of the archetype.
Transactional.
A well-written Manousos variable is rarely benevolent. They do not solve the hero's problem for free.
Because they're isolated, disciplined, suspicious, they're naturally reluctant to help.
Of course. They look at the protagonist, who probably still has a smartwatch and a digital bank account, and they see a massive liability. They might literally say, "You smell like the system."
So the hero has to earn the help.
Yes. They often have to fail first, be rejected by the Manousos figure, and then actively strip away their own digital dependencies, ditch the car, smash the phone, prove they can think analog before any partnership can happen.
This turns the cheap rescue into a crucible for character development. The hero isn't handed a weapon, they're forced to decontaminate themselves.
It's a baptism by isolation.
Wow. And you see this even outside of sci-fi, right? You mentioned spiritual suspense novels.
Yes, it's a fascinating application. In those narratives, the system is often defined as the world. You know, the pervasive culture drifting toward moral relativity or spiritual darkness.
Okay, so in that context, who's the Manousos variable?
It becomes the believer who has maintained specific, difficult spiritual disciplines, prayer, fasting, scripture memorization, while the culture around them has traded those for something easier.
So they're immune to the deception.
Not because they're inherently holier, but because they are rooted in a different external source material that the system can't track or influence. This grounding prevents the story from just being a generic battle of magical powers. It focuses the conflict on integrity.
They become the remnant.
Exactly. The biblical concept of the faithful minority, which adds this profound theological depth, turning the thriller into a meditation on what it means to be in the world, but not of it.
So what does this all mean? When we really look back at the Manousos variable, we realize it is not just some quirky character trait or convenient plot twist.
Yeah, not at all.
It's a structural necessity in any story about total control. because it injects the chaotic, unpredictable power of human free will back into what is otherwise a deterministic narrative.
The scariest villain today isn't a monster behind bars. It's a consensus. A seamless system that everyone agrees is good or convenient, except for one stubborn, difficult outlier. And that outlier shows the limits of the system's power.
The ultimate act of rebellion isn't burning down the city. It's simply refusing to be synchronized with it. This character reminds us that while the system may have all the data, the resistor, through discipline and choice, has access to the truth. And in a thriller, that truth is the most dangerous weapon of all.
Which I think raises an important question, something for you to mull over as you navigate your own highly connected life. As our world becomes more interconnected, more monitored, more algorithmically curated, what small analog disciplines in your own life might actually be preserving your vital blind spot? Which old way are you maintaining, whether it's using physical books, writing key thoughts by hand, maybe paying in cash sometimes, or just choosing periods of enforced disconnection that gives you existential integrity against the consensus? That's something worth considering.